Welcome everyone to our Conscious Health podcast. Today we have an honored guest, Kim Hamilton, and of course my co-host Natasha Rocha. Thank you for being here, Kim. And Kim was raised in Edmonton and completed her Bachelor of Education degree at the University of Alberta. She taught 5 years in Edmonton before moving to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico in 2005. And she taught 9 years, and it was during that time that her own healing journey started. It started with acupuncture and then yoga and meditation, then counseling. In 2014, she moved back to Edmonton, knowing that she wanted to go back to school and get her master's degree to become a therapist. She continued her own healing, becoming a Reiki master and connecting with craniosacral therapy, subconscious imprinting, and the Akashic records. After completing her master and counseling degree, she began the somatic experiencing training created by Dr. Peter Levine, and she had earned through her own experiences that trauma had been held in her body or in our body, let's say, and how moving it had changed from inside out and wanted to learn how to support by therapy clients and in a similar way to all of them. And she has been using SE for almost 5 years, and she's an official somatic experiencing practitioner. In addition, she has assisted her training students in SE in Edmonton, Colombia, and Chile. So Latin American also. And I think that's it. So there's a lot of unpack there. So let's begin with your own journey. How did you discover that this uh, somatic experiencing was your path?
Mm.
And
Mhm. Well, I believe I can pinpoint it to actually starting with yoga because I had just started practicing yoga. I'd been doing it for about 6 weeks. And
Mhm.
another teacher friend of mine would give tutorial classes to one of my students. And so one day I had popped into her room to just be like, hey, are you coming to yoga tonight? And she said, oh, I don't know, but maybe. And then after I had left, my student had said to her, you know what, Miss Kylie, I really like it when Miss Kim goes to yoga. And my friend had thought, that's such an odd thing to say. And so when she asked him, like, why do you say that? He said, well, she doesn't yell at us as much. And I was like, oh, it's that noticeable. And I was only going twice a week. So I didn't think it had been making that much of a difference, but clearly my students were picking up on it. And so I remember there'd be moments in yoga where I could just feel the energy moving. I started to notice that I did have more patience, more tolerance. It had opened up my heart, and it really started me on that journey. And then in 2017, when I started my master's program, on the very first day of our very first class, we had an instructor, and she had just gotten back from the first module of the last year of the SE training. And she was talking about how somatic experiencing, it's a modality that helps move trauma out of the body and the nervous system store all this stuff. And it was like I had been hit by a light bulb. That's what I need to do. And then just as soon as I finished my master's, I went right into the SE training. And each module just showed me more and more, both as a client and as a practitioner, how amazing this practice can be.
It is quite incredible how our body stores all of this, right? Because having done cranial as well, it was one of those aspects where it's incredible how it holds memory, and It was as simple as that, where, say, for example, I went and I did some kind of like, I think I needed an injection in my mouth. And 3 weeks later, I was like, I couldn't move my neck and I couldn't understand why, what was going on. So I went to the chiropractor. And it was so interesting because as soon as he pressed on that area where it hurt, it was the memory of the injection in my mouth. And I was like, ah, that's where it came from. Would you be able to explain it more? Uh, you just elaborate on how trauma, how it actually impacts the body and why somatic helps to release it.
Beautiful. Absolutely. So oftentimes when I'm working with a new client, I'll give them this kind of understanding because our society has gotten so used to being able to push things down, forget about them, or like, I need to be the tough one, right? So I often say, most of us have had the experience as children when we're on the playground and somebody says, hey, Natasha, catch, and they throw the ball to you. But you go to turn to catch it and it hits you. You know, our head goes, I'm fine, shake it off. I don't want to cry. I don't want kids to make fun of me. But our body, our nervous system goes, holy smokes, I was just attacked and I couldn't defend or protect myself. So it's like something as simple as that in our nervous system can get stored. And so through somatic experiencing, I'm often working with clients and I'm telling them, we're turning your brain down because it's trying to override what your body wants us to deal with. And so we're often working with the sensation, the tightness, the tension, the heaviness. And that's leading us to whether it's a specific memory, a specific event, or we're just creating space in the nervous system that it doesn't have. Because, for example, people that have panic attacks, a panic attack by definition doesn't have a specific trigger. It happens randomly, right? An anxiety attack happens for specific situations, but panic, it's not necessarily no. So in that case, I can't say, hey, let's work on this specific thing. But there's exercises that I can do where my nervous system is regulated. And as soon as we're in a space, even in this virtual space, our nervous systems are connecting. So we're going to do a couple exercises and we're just going to let your nervous system cycle through all the times that it needed to finish completing a cycle and it was interrupted. And so it's like, sometimes, unless we do it, it's hard to explain. It sounds sometimes kind of woo-woo. I've had clients say in joke, like that voodoo stuff. And it's like, it's not voodoo, it's actual neuroscience. But it's weird because it's very unconventional in terms of traditional therapy, right? I'm not just going to have you tell me your trauma and we're going to like change your thought around it. I'm going to stop you all along the way and we're going to notice what your body was picking up beforehand. So like in terms of therapy, a lot of modern therapy is what we call top down. So that idea of I have a thought, then I have a feeling, and now I can take an action. But somatic experiencing is working with more of that reptilian part of our brain. We're working bottom up. So it's like we know that something's happening in our body, in our nervous system, long before we have a feeling and a conscious thought. It's like that same idea of when you meet someone and you're like, ugh, there's something about them I don't like. Your nervous system has picked up on something. You might not have words for why. It doesn't seem logical, but something in your nervous system is saying, I'm having a memory, and maybe it's not related to this person specifically, but something about this person is reminding me of a time or a person where I wasn't necessarily safe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it made a lot of sense because many times the voice, for example, the smell, those things that you pick up from a person make you feel uh, anxious, make you feel sometimes angry, and you don't understand that because you don't link those things to someone in your past, either your father or uh, someone that was taking care of you that probably yelled at you and didn't or repressed some emotion in that moment, and that boy, that smell reminded you of the person, and then you develop this emotion that you say, why am I feeling like this? And that's the woo woo thing that people think, but it's it's invisible in terms of matter, but it's that doesn't mean that doesn't exist. It exists in your chemical language, because you all of the emotions have this chemistry inside of you that if you don't let it go, if you don't process it, then it has to look for an outlet. And in any moment on time, it can be.
Yeah. Well, and even like I remember it was the second year of my SE training. We were doing a module on natural disasters.
Mm.
And there had been a topic of, okay, think of a time where there was a natural disaster, but everything ended okay. So, growing up in Alberta and the training was in Alberta, lots of people had ideas about like a thunderstorm or a snowstorm or things like that. And I was thinking back to my second year in Vallarta. There was a hurricane that was coming towards us. And so we had all just gotten back to school. And then that day we had to repack up our classrooms. We were told, make sure you have water, candles, food, things like that. And, from Alberta, we don't have hurricanes. That's something totally new. We've had tornadoes that last half an hour and it's gone. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this hurricane one, because in the night, the hurricane had gone away. So we were fine. And when we were in our triads doing the practice round, I had been planning on talking about this hurricane, natural disaster. And I had made one tiny comment about how the year before, the school had placed me in an apartment with another teacher at the school. We were both to the school, and nothing bad ever happened with her. Like, we didn't have any conflicts. We didn't have any fights. But my nervous system actually said that living with her that year was more dangerous than that hurricane. So it was like, I never felt at home. That idea of walking on eggshells, even though we never had any conflicts, in my nervous system, my body processed that as more traumatic than the potential hurricane.
Mm.
And so it's always interesting. Like, people will say, I had a great childhood. I didn't have any things that happened to me. Or, I've never been in a major motor vehicle accident. But it's like, how your brain has processed this is very different than how your nervous system processes things. And so somatic experiencing, we're working with your nervous system and its language and its sensations, because it carries a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because our nervous systems are so conditioned for the environments that we're in, right? So it's almost kind of like we're actually born into it. I think it actually happens in utero, where we start to build the function of our nervous system, our brain, and everything to be able to, be birthed into an environment that we're in. So it's quite interesting, because if we spend a lot of time in that heightened, growing up in South Africa, they always have like, there's this always kind of like, what's going to attack me? Is it going to attack me? And you always have this perception. It becomes a normality, right? And it becomes your baseline. So I believe like, and I'll never forget this. I'll give you another example. I had just moved to Edinburgh and I was 21. Right. And I'd gone to meet a friend of mine, and I knew I was working at 7 o'clock the next morning, and I loved walking. So I met a friend of mine in a pub, and I said to her at 11 o'clock, I said, like, I have to go. I'm like working really early tomorrow morning. Because I'd get up at 5 because the shift started at 7, because I need to get ready. And then I would walk, because it would take me just over an hour to walk. And I loved walking. So said to her, I need to go. So she's like, okay. She's like, I'm going to stay behind. I'm like, you do you. But I'm out of here, right? And I remember walking down this place in Edinburgh, and it's almost kind of like, it was an alleyway, but nothing enclosed, and it wasn't really dodgy. But I started to realize that without even noticing, I knew how many people were walking behind me, if they were male, if they were female, their level of intoxication, the amount of danger I was in, and if I had an escape route, where would I go? And that was like this. It was like I had, three guys walking behind me, a couple behind me over there. I had people in front of me. I was like, that light is open. There's a club over there. If I run into the middle of the street, people will see me. I'm not going to go this way because this is where my house is. And that was in like split second. And I was just like, wow, this is like a norm, right? It's just like, it's absolutely incredible that we are so used to living in this normality of a taxed nervous system that we don't even realize that we're like the level of stress we are until like later on in life where everything starts dysfunctioning and we're like, okay, I need to look at this, right? What are your thoughts around that? And how can we start to work through that in a way to even understand what our baseline is?
Good question. Well, I do 100% agree that we become predispositioned from our childhood. And so much so that even like in utero, we can develop the predisposition of a freeze response because that's our first instinct that we have. That's the first thing that develops. And I remember in our training, it being explained as like the fetus that's in utero, if the mom suddenly is in danger or has like a sudden hit of cortisol or adrenaline, because of the way that fetuses get fed, that through the umbilical cord, that cortisol goes into the baby. And in that fetus, the fetus has a natural impulse to wiggle to try and get away from it. So that wiggle is they're trying to escape this cortisol. And if it happens repeatedly, the fetus will learn that it can't do anything. So it actually develops a freeze response before the baby is even born. So it's like we can even be born having freeze in our system and not even know it. And of course, parents aren't looking for freeze. We're not thinking that, something that happened to me was harming my baby, or like by having this, stressful job would do that to the fetus and cause my child to be in a freeze response. But it does happen. And so, it's interesting. I've seen videos of Peter Levine work with children who have birth trauma. So like they got stuck in the canal. And so some of those natural instincts of pushing were muted. And so he's worked with children, and SE practitioners can work with children on completing. We talk about in SE, we want to complete the responses that we're trying to happen. And often we have these reactions and we keep repeating them because we're looking for a way to change it. So I sometimes explain it as like that short circuit. I used to teach grade 5 electricity. So it was like, imagine we've had this electric circuit happening, but then it got cut in the middle. And so you're repeating, or you're having this nightmare over and over again because some part of you is trying to complete this event. And so through SE, we're going to complete that, and then you'll get relief, and then you're not going to be looping in the same way. And so not like, for me, my experience with clients, a lot of times, one of the first and most important things we're working with is developing safety. And sometimes even that word safe or safety is a trigger because they're like, I've never felt safe in my life, because it started in childhood where maybe they didn't have a safe home. And then they've been in relationships that weren't safe emotionally or physically or any other way. Work hasn't been a safe place. So we're trying to establish what safety feels like, first and foremost, within their own system. And so, like, even just hearing you talk about being on high alert and looking for where the attack is coming from, it's like there's that I need to find safety.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like with SE, I'm working on, okay, let's teach your nervous system what safety feels like.
Yeah.
And we have to do it slowly, because if suddenly I were to just show your nervous system, this is what safety looks like, it would be so overwhelming. It would feel very unsafe. So it's this nice balancing act a lot of times with clients of, we're going to work to renegotiate some of that trauma, or like complete those short circuits, and we're going to expand your nervous system's capacity to feel safety and to feel calm and to trust that that's okay. Because a lot of times when we've lived a life of chaos, that chaos is what feels normal and safe. And so suddenly, if we remove the chaos and we're sitting in calmness, there is a natural impulse to create chaos, because that's familiar and I know how to deal with that. Sitting in calmness, that's scary. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense in
Beautiful.
terms of also what I lived in my own home. That with my father also was like walking on eggshells, and I didn't have a good relationship with him. So I associated my house with this kind of um, uncomfortable feeling of first not feeling safe, and then having arguments or discussions with him. So I didn't want to be in my house. But nowadays, I took the opposite thing, and now what I do is that I protect a lot of my home, and I like to be just by myself. And I had a very difficult time living with other people, including my daughter, including my uh, ex couple, and it was really really difficult because I felt that my space was being threatened again, and that I didn't have a room to be at peace or calm or all of those things. So I think that it has a lot of impact in your adult life, where when you have those chaotic environment as a child and you want to recreate your space, no? And then you associate different things with that.
Absolutely.
So in a, let's say that you are with a client similar with a similar story like the one that I'm telling you, what would you do so that you can start helping him or helping her to process that chaotic environment and, let's say, release that kind of pressure or trauma, and then move on into next different stages?
Good question. So every client is different, but what I would say is, first and foremost, the way I work with somatic experiencing is, I'm always looking for ways for you to tune into what feels right for you. So part of you building safety is I'm always giving you options. So I will say, for example, you're going to hear me slow down a lot. And I'm always going to ask you, is it okay if we stop here? Is it okay if we do this? Because I want you to start to notice what's going on. And if it's not okay, I want you to be able to tell me that. One of the things we do know about most trauma is it happens fast and without our permission. So in order to really do some good trauma work, I want you to know you have lots of permission to say no. And it's not going to change our relationship. I'm not going to be upset. You're not disappointing me. It's like, okay, this isn't the time. So, for example, in your case, in the example you gave, I might start with something like, okay, I have two thoughts. One might be, what would happen if we started to notice what was in your body when we just think about your dad? And then be like, as soon as that happens, it's almost guaranteed there's stuff showing up. There's often a tightness, a tension, a heaviness. Okay, so we could explore that. Or I might invite you to see what would happen if you just pictured your childhood home. Or I
Mhm.
might invite you to think of a time where you really didn't feel safe. Okay, and so we might process a specific event or a specific place or a specific person, and we would gradually build up to a more like a bigger event. We don't ever want to, in terms of the nervous system, we don't ever want to start with the biggest, baddest thing because if your nervous system doesn't have capacity right now, that's going to re-traumatize or overwhelm you. Where I want to start is with the edges of a smaller thing, because if we can reduce whatever charge is right here, the next time when we go higher, there's more space. And then we can do that. And then the next time there's more space. And so as we get to the climax of whatever event, it's not as scary because we've created all this space already in your nervous system. So it really depends. And I'm always looking for the client to decide what feels right for them. Because I always say to them, I'm not the expert in your journey. You've lived it. I'm never going to know you, even if we were to see each other once a week for an hour for 30 years. I'm never going to know you as much as you know yourself. So it's like, I want you to feel what feels best for you. One of my mentors used to say that when she meets with a client, she would always say, when we do this work, I'm going to stop you until you can stop yourself. So it's like, I'm going to pause you in your story when I'm noticing something. So I might notice the way your breathing has changed, or your jaw looks very tight or something. Or I might notice something in my body. My breathing has changed, which usually means your breathing has changed because I'm picking up using those mirror neurons. And so when I notice that we have activation, I might want to pause you. But I love it when I have clients who they're used to me doing this work. They get used to me stopping them all the time. And then once their nervous systems are way more regulated, they're going into an event and they're like, wait a second, Kim, I need to slow down for a second. Brilliant. You can slow yourself down. You know that there's activation.
Nice.
I've got a weird question for you, Kim.
Yeah.
Like that's like I think that's awesome. So that's dealing with what's happened in the past, right? We all know that in this lifetime, I don't think anybody escapes this planet without trauma. I mean, this is where we learn, where we expect, where we grow. So how can we proactively deal with trauma? So we know that it happens. We know that it has like physical, mental, emotional aspect. How can we become more like that deer that managed to just get away from the lion 10 minutes ago and go sit by the river or by the pond and drink some like water, where it's like, it's a new life. It's a new day. It's a new second. It's a new thing. I'm not holding on to this trauma. You know, I know that we experienced it 100% before to close off that loop. But I mean, trauma happens. How do we actually proactively deal with it?
I have two thoughts on that one.
Okay, good.
In Peter Levine's book, Waking the Tiger, he goes and he gives this example of, because some of somatic experiencing was created by him observing animals and seeing like, why are exactly that? Why does that deer not carry the trauma? And one of the things he talks about is when once the threat is over, almost every animal has the instinct to shake. That's their body's way of moving the adrenaline, moving the cortisol out so it doesn't get stuck. So it's like, I always tell a client after an SE session, I'm like, I recommend a 5-minute dance party. I say a 5-minute dance party because I recognize most of us feel kind of silly if we're just like, I'm just going to shake like a crazy person, right? But it's like, if I put on some music and I have a dance party, I'm doing that. I'm moving that energy out. So it's not stuck, but I feel less weird about it. So when a big thing like that happens, like, 5 minutes ago, somebody almost you were almost in a car accident, they almost hit you. If you have a chance, get out of your car and just shake your body out.
Take it off.
Shake it off. Literally shake it off.
Yeah.
That's going to move wherever it is, right? And just give your body whatever time it needs to shake. And then the other thing is, there's the quote of, trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens without an empathetic witness. So if you can find someone that is trusted, a friend, a family member, a partner, a therapist, that you're like, hey, I need to talk about what just happened. Having someone bear witness to what you just experienced, if you can connect with them, that's also going to support that not being stuck inside of you. But a lot of our trauma happens because, like in my first example, I'm fine, shake it off, push it down, right? But it's like if we bring it to light, if we have someone that goes, holy man, that is scary. You survived. Wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad you're here. What else was it about that? Then we can feel like, okay, I'm seen and I'm heard, and this isn't going to be stuck inside of me.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about the shaking response. Also, a small walk could do the trick, or breathing sometimes. No?
Yeah, it can. It's interesting. In another one of Peter Levine's books, he talks about when he was a pedestrian and he got hit by a motor vehicle, like a motor vehicle hit him, and he flew. And the body's natural reaction to that, as part of it moving through the shock, is actually a shaking. That is the body's natural thing, right? And so knowing this as he did, he wouldn't let the paramedics touch him, because as soon as you cut that short, that's where the trauma happens. So he wouldn't let the paramedics move him until all of his trembling had ceased. And then there's no trauma because you didn't cut short the response. So breathing is great, absolutely. Same with going for a walk, but there is something in that shaking from the head to the toe, because it is something that your body will do. Like, think about, if you've ever had the experience of something really scary happening, you do start to tremble. You start to tremble head to toe. And it's like, that's your body's way of trying to move this event through, trying to process what happened. So like just shaking it off kind of gives it a little bit of a kick into it.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny because I agree with that. And even if we're feeling stuck, a lot of the recommendations that we get in the Akashic Records or that I've gotten, is to go do something that pulls your adrenaline, right? Because that energy that surges through your body, it's almost like I feel like it's a reset kind of button that it hits, that comes through that. The other thing that I was going to say, I love those two suggestions. I was listening to I can't remember who the psychologist is, even though he's well known. He was actually talking to Mel Robbins, and there was this little clip, and he said, you know what, in a scenario, say, for example, where a girl gets sexually abused or whatever it is, the real trauma doesn't necessarily lie in, obviously it's a horrendous act, but it's in the fact that there was nobody that she could have spoken to or he could have spoken to. And it's that gap of needing to, there isn't a safe space to express this trauma. And I never thought about it that way until then, which is funny, it just showed up this week. It's kind of like, it's not feeling that supported, which is what's made it unsafe, is that I have no adult that I can go and express this to. So I found that to be so very interesting, and that being absolutely, perhaps in some cases, even more traumatizing, and things like that. So yeah, I find it very, very fascinating about, and it becomes so important to hold that space. Right. And I think in the society these days, we're so busy that a lot of the times we forget to be present. And I think that's a huge thing that supports that. Our bodies are a fascinating machine, really, more than anything else. But yeah, so the question for you, Kim, is, so now we've known, like, we can work through our trauma, and what do you think about therapies that are like no talk therapies? Because when does, like, there's an aspect of trauma that I know is speaking, talking about it, but reiterating it sometimes could re-traumatize the body as well and strengthen those neural pathways too. So it's like, how do we move through that? And sometimes there's some therapies that there is no talk therapy. How do you find that? Like, I've just tried this new technology. I don't think it's new technology, but it's kind of like this egg where you go in and it's just through sound and frequency that vibrates through your body. And I found that to be interesting, just because I'm curious of different therapies as well. So it's two questions. When does reiterating, staying stuck in the story do more damage or re-traumatize the body? And two is there a place for no talk therapies as well?
Okay. I feel like both of those are controversial questions in the psychology.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Okay. So I'll let you play between the lines within that.
Well, and it's like, so before being trained in somatic experiencing, I was trained in EMDR, so eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's interesting. So EMDR comes from a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy. Therapists have their own opinions. That tends to be what modern day therapy is considered like the gold star, the benchmark, because it is evidence based, right? It's one of those things. You have a thought, well, we can change your thought. Da, 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 da. Those therapists who are what we would call more depth oriented, who are in the branches of like psychodynamic, narrative, attachment, we know that it's not as simple as, changing your thought. And so then when we bring in something like SE and EMDR are often very different in how they view things, because EMDR by its nature is very fast. We're going in, we're going out, we're reprocessing, and it's like taking you into the biggest part of that event as fast as possible. Whereas SE is like, no, we're working with your nervous system. We want to do something different. EMDR is working with the brain, so it's very cognitive in that sense. It does bring in emotion and different things, but not on the same level where SE is. Okay. So in terms of like my personal philosophy, I'm obviously very much more in the SE camp, because I have seen how powerful it can be with clients and moving slowly. I have seen what happens when we go into something too fast. And then the non-talk therapy, I think there's room a lot of times for everything. I think it's individual.
Mm-hmm.
I think how individual feels that their healing happens. So my experience, like you said at the top of the podcast, I've gone through so many what would be considered alternative healing practices. My journey has not been linear. It's not just been talk therapy. Yes, that's been a big part of it, but so has acupuncture, chiro, yoga, craniosacral therapy, subconscious imprinting, Reiki. So like for me, it's a mind, body, spirit thing. And so like something frequencies or energy, that's part of this. And I welcome it all. And when I have clients that show up and they're like, hey, Kim, I tried this. It was wild. And I'm like, tell me more about this. And I get curious, because if it's going to help, it's going to help. But not everybody is wanting or able to go slow like SE is. All of my clients, I would say most of them have had relief to whatever symptom they're experiencing within the first session or two. But if they've had a sexualized assault, for example, that's going to take us a while to really process. And so if there's a tolerance to work into that, great. But some people want it to be one and done or two and done. And so if that's what they're looking for, then they're going to find that in a different modality. Did I
Mm.
answer? I was like, did I answer the questions?
Mhm.
So, yes, you did. Thank you.
And I was thinking that this slow process motion of creating spaces in
Mm,
between and taking the people into this journey of their own story, I think it sounds really good for me. I think in terms of making the body adapt to the different kind of responses that you will create, and that in its own way, it's like reprogramming the story again
mm,
and recreating something that is now safe, that is now clean, let's say, and that now you can cohabitate in your own new story, let's say.
yeah.
So I was just thinking that the more space you create, the easier it will be, as the client that you mentioned, to stop yourself, regulate, and recognize that you are going up in the ladder of emotion, in the ladder of, let's say, vibration also.
Mm,
And then you come back, you learn so well, and you feel your whole body, that you recognize many of those triggers, or sometimes even let's say subtle responses that anyone else can perceive. And as you say, I'm not the expert, you are the expert, so you make people be their own masters of the body until they really perform better and really create also trust. So for me, it makes a whole process,
yeah,
let's say a holistic way of healing.
Mm.
absolutely. One of the neat examples I have from my own experience is, without knowing it, because before starting this journey, if you had asked me if I carried a lot of rage inside, I would have said no. I'm a happy, positive person. But I did have a lot of anger. And in particular, through this journey, through my own healing through SE, because it really came out with SE, was that I really struggled. I would actually go into freeze when it when I would feel anger towards either family members or in romantic relationships. So I wouldn't even know I was angry. I would
Mm.
shut down. And there was a while where I thought, arrogantly enough, like, look how evolved I am, but I'm not like engaging in these fights, like I'm not. But I didn't realize that I was actually in a freeze response. And I remember it was in the last year of the SE training, I was a client in one of our triad groups, and I was discussing an event, and I had noticed that something was happening in my feet, but I didn't know what. And the person who was being the practitioner had at first invited me to put my feet on the ground because I was sitting cross-legged in a chair. And I said no. But when I did, when I eventually decided, okay, my feet are ready, there was this whole flash. Like it was like from the tips of my toes all the way up, it was this heat like I had never experienced. And I was like, what is that? And then when I started working with my own somatic experiencing practitioner, I was like, okay, we need to work on this anger thing. Because what I realized is I would never know I was angry at these people, whether it was an ex partner or whatever, but my feet would be ice cold. I could have been in the hottest of hot tubs and my feet were ice cold. So I was like, oh, that's my freeze response. That's where it's now hiding. And so we had started to work on it and working through different times, different relationships where I should have been mad. I should have had some kind of expression of anger and didn't. And each time we did, the freeze would show up in my feet, but it was a little bit less and a little bit less. And then suddenly, in present day moments, I can go, huh, I'm angry, and I can say it, and I can say it. And it doesn't mean I'm exploding. It doesn't mean that I'm aggressive or destructive. But anger had been very early on conditioned in me that it is not, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to feel angry. So I had to shove it down. And then knowing that anger, like for some clients too, they've seen very unhealthy expressions of anger. So their coping mechanism has also been to shut it down. So they go into freeze. And it's like there's such a joy when you can access all those emotions. We need to be able to feel anger. Anger tells us a boundary has been crossed, or I need to defend or protect myself. But if I don't have access to that, then I can't. So like to work through my own freeze response and go like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, it is so rewarding when we can work and have the capacity in our nervous system to feel anger, to feel fear, to feel anxiousness, whatever it is we need to feel, or sadness. Some people shut down the sadness because it's so scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. There's a few things that you said there that I want to talk to. So I love how you put like, where is it hiding, right? Because we shove emotion into so many different places. We don't know where it is, right? It's absolutely incredible how we do that. And I do a lot of that, like, oh, I'm feeling this. Okay, where are you feeling it in your body? Right, which is quite interesting when we're working through that. Like, where have you hidden that? Like, where have you suppressed that? Which is awesome. And then which eventually I believe shows up as disease or discomfort because it's like a little pebble. And I talk about in cranial, it becomes kind of like that little kind of like that, they call it an energy cyst. So it becomes like that little pebble in your fascia or in your organ that's sitting there that needs to be released. The other thing is that also shows up is like saying, okay, how old do you feel, or did you feel when you went through that? Because that'll take you back to that a memory at least that is coming up that is there, right? Which I've also found that quite incredible because that also connected into where that's going. So it's like, oh, where did that 5-year-old hide that? Which is beautiful, because sometimes we think, oh, you know, like I'm hurt here, but the source of it is somewhere totally different. And the other thing that you said as well is like I absolutely feel that, especially when in my world more into the spirituality world, and it's so funny. I've termed I coined the term bubblegum spirituality in a sense where like we all have to be love and light, and everything is like we can't have low emotions, and we can't be in anger because it's supposed to be a low emotion. Anger, like you said, gets a bad rep because we've only seen the scale of it that is destructive, and perhaps we do need to destroy something. But anger is fire and energy that, how can I express it in a way that will propel me forward? How can I use this energy to propel me in a way, even if it's like, I will never let this happen to me again, is a great way to kind of propel this. Or if it'd be like, screw you guys, I'm going to show you I'm going to be successful, and take that energy and go, okay, I'm going to make something of this. Because I feel that we get given all of these things really as a palette to paint our lives with. So it's that, how do we move forward with this, in that? And yeah, so I love that you literally picked that up, because sometimes we disguise it. It's all coping mechanisms. It's all, helping us to just live, survive, become resilient against stuff. And it's incredible once we start to unpack it. But I also believe to unpack it without judgment, because a lot of the times we don't know what we're doing with it or why, And it's like you say, like, I have no opinion on what you've done because I haven't walked your shoes. It's not up to me, which is important. I think, yeah, it's quite incredible when it comes to that. So how would you suggest from the other aspect is, let's bring in the spirituality side. Okay. A lot of trauma births purpose, right? Healed trauma usually makes us the people that we are today, or drives us to do better things. So for example, for you, it's kind of like the same as cranial. When I found cranial, I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff exists. Like, what is this? I want to get into this. It's like, and it served me and so many people as well, right? So, how would you, in your experiences through dealing with a lot of your clients, how have you found that to kind of like, again, like take anger, make it something conducive, take your trauma and express it in a different way?
Um, Good question. I think as a lot of my clients have gone through this, they've had similar experiences as me, as in the sense of like they feel a sense of freedom, like they didn't realize how much of themselves they were holding back or had been limited or that they had turned away from. And so it's like this piece of being able to accept what happened to them and it didn't define them. And there's a freedom in that. Sometimes as they go through this, a lot of my clients in their own metamorphosis struggle. There's a moment because as they start to change, as we know, like our vibration raises. And then we're suddenly not resonating with the same people we used to resonate. So there is this almost like a grieving process that we also have to look into a lot of times because they're losing friends or family members that they're like, I don't want to be around that anymore. And it's like, yeah, it's very real. And so part of that is like, okay, well, now how do you go about and seek out connections that are going to enhance your life, not take away from it? And so part of it is a struggle for a lot of clients. And I think COVID didn't help because more people went inward and a lot of the ways that people could connect are not there anymore. But I've seen clients then go and change careers or they've gotten out of unhealthy relationships and they're in healthy relationships, or they're choosing partners that are also open to doing their own healing because they're now setting these boundaries like, look, if you want to be in my life, I love you, but you need to get yourself worked on because trauma and my trauma, I've got my trauma under control, but I either can't be with you or you need to work on. So it's like their lives have changed with their careers, with their friendships, and even just their own inspirations. They've changed with their interests.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Love that because I think that's a process that most of us go and suffer that kind of transformation and isolation also from the toxicity many times. And we are very careful with whom we relate to. I mean, I'm very open to share many of my experiences with people that I trust, and even though I have just met them, I feel that safety because I know how let's say, as you mentioned, also enhance or heighten way of resonating with people and feeling the vibration of others and just perceiving that you can share things without being threatened. And I think that this is also similar to the process that you do in SE when you make those spaces. In your own life, you are now recreating those spaces. You are making people have a space where they are going to include a different kind of people, and now they get out from the spaces that they recognize as triggers. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, and it's like one of the things we talk about in SE is all trauma work is boundary work, right? Because trauma either pushed in our boundaries or didn't respect our boundaries. So when we're creating these new circles and pushing people out, it's because we now feel confident in setting a boundary. You're not good for me. I don't have to be in a relationship with you. So it's like, yeah, let's kick you out and let's choose. We get to choose who we bring into our circles now.
Beautiful. I love that. I think we can keep talking. Like, I really need to do another one of these for sure. Kim, if you were to summarize somatic work in moving through your trauma, how would you summarize it?
I would say that somatic experiencing is a way to move or renegotiate trauma so that you're not being held prisoner in your body anymore. That there's a freedom, there's a space, there's capacity, and an awareness. You have connection. You're able to access all of your fight, freeze instincts when needed. And it allows us to live more fully.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us and your experiences. We absolutely love that. Just very quickly, how do people get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, which is www.innerlightpsychology, all one word, .org.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Natasha. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We will wait for your questions and also if you can share your story. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.